My, male 22, GF, female 23, engaged in a short-term emotional affair and refused to admit or apologize until after I ended the relationship. Is getting back together foolish? It has been almost a year and a half since I have been in a committed monogamous relationship with my partner, B. In addition, we work together. This summer, from May to the present, I've been studying for a graduate exam while still working full-time and doing research. Because of my job, spending quality time with my family has become more difficult than it has been in the past. Because B is enrolled in summer school, there has been a scarcity of time on both sides of the family table. Everything we've done has been geared toward making the most of the circumstance. However, I'll be the first to admit that it hasn't been an easy road for either of us so far. As a consequence of my own stress as a result of my obligations, our communication began to deteriorate significantly. Throughout this time, B has seemed to grasp the significance of the situation. In any case, it wasn't until about a week ago that I learned B had been conversing, both in person and online, with a single male colleague of mine. H.H. is well known on our college campus for sleeping around, and is commonly regarded as a creep. H is a creep. As a result, this new friendship has caught me completely by surprise. During the period I was studying, B and H began to spend more time together in social circumstances outside the workplace. After some time has gone, I learned through a coworker that H is infatuated with B. I was unaware of this until now. When I inquired about this link with B, he responded by accusing me of being jealous. She believed I was just jealous of her new colleagues, which was incorrect. She regarded him as a nice, loving person with whom she had a close friendship. This friendship developed into regular contact, culminating in a business dinner at which B was texting H from across the table while sitting opposite me, a situation that I found disturbing. When she looked up at him after sending him a Snapchat and tried to hide her phone from me, it had a deep and lasting impression on me. For me, the evening was a complete disaster, and I felt deceived. I couldn't leave since B had driven me to the supper. In the aftermath of dinner, I ended my relationship with B by declaring, "This is more than a friendship. This is not acceptable to me." She didn't think it was possible to enjoy two people at the same time, B says, adding that she was confused, an accurate remark, although in an emotional situation. When they clashed in the parking lot and both grew agitated, she threatened to leave me there, about an hour from our town. I requested that she drive me back to my apartment, which she eventually did. The next day, B comes to my apartment to pick up her items, and we have a nice conversation. It seems that B does not recognize that our connection with H has deteriorated into an emotional affair and is disappointed in our decision to part ways. After hours of conversation, she ultimately admits that she was wrong, but maintains that she never considered it an affair until I confronted her, and that it was just a friendship between us until I confronted her. She ultimately apologized, barred H from her home, and said that having an affair was never her intention. She also expressed her gratitude for the attention she received from H, which she did not get from me, in her statement. During this lengthy debate, she left and returned to my apartment many times before her attitude began to shift in favor of me. I'm at a loss on what to do at this point. Is this a red flag that I should not ignore, or is it a misunderstanding for which I should forgive her? What should I do now? Despite the fact that she expressed regret at the very last second, I don't want to be trodden on. Update. I called it quits with B after we attempted to make it work for a few days after the events mentioned in this article. The partnership was no longer making either of us happy. It's lifted a great burden off my shoulders, and I'm really glad when I get up in the mornings now. If you're in a bad relationship, I'd advise you to be open and honest with your spouse. If the only alternative is to terminate the relationship, know that things will get better. There are a plethora of other individuals in the world that will treat you decently, and it may not be your present relationship. It's normal to have a breakup. Don't accept a lousy relationship. It's unjust to both you and your lover. Note, if you came here through someone attempting to expose me, please read my other blogs, share them on social media, or just leave a comment. I'd also recommend reading the exposer's comments on my postings. Although this is a public Reddit account, you should be aware that you are merely exposing B, who, in my view, does not deserve it. I'll try my best to react if you post a remark in good faith. Story 2. Caught my wife 24 female of 2 years about to cheat with my 30 male, best friend 30 male. Starting with a little background knowledge will help me make this as concise as possible. I met my wife, who we'll call Jess, around 6-7 years ago, and we've been together ever since. We were simply friends until both of us were able to get out of abusive situations. We were always there for one another, no matter what. We became closer and, eventually, started dating one another. We had been dating for a little more than a year at the time. Then she found out she was pregnant. We had a kid and decided to get married shortly after. Everything seemed to be going swimmingly. Although I recognize that we're both at fault, it was only after we'd been together for a while that I began to have trust issues. She told me about her upbringing and the two guys with whom she had had affairs. I had completely trusted her up until that point, which made me feel uncomfortable, but I tried not to let it affect my decision-making. As a result of being by her uncle, Jess has a history of sadness, anxiety, and agoraphobia. Among other things, the things I was aiding her with while she was in therapy were the things I was assisting her with when she was in therapy. As someone who comes from a family with a long history of depression, I'm feeling a lot of the effects of everything right now. Never knew any of this until just a couple nights ago. My family and friends attributed my personality changes on the fact that I worked 2 jobs 6 days a week, so I had no clue how bad things were becoming for me. My wife only works on weekends and sometimes for a few hours a day during the week. She has no children. Currently, I'm asking for help dealing with it and leaving her past in the past behind her. Tim, my friend, is the next to arrive. Even before we met, Tim made many attempts to separate Jess from her boyfriend, who was at the time living with her. Jesse put an end to it by blocking him on all social media platforms and banning him from calling or texting her. None of this was revealed to me until after Jess and I had begun dating, which was disappointing. On the rare occasion when we got together for a BBQ, Tim was distant and disregarded her. As soon as we informed him that Jess was expecting, his only response could be, "I need a coat hanger." He then began to blabber on about Jess to everyone who would listen. We had a falling out and were unable to communicate for around 2 years. During the holidays last year, he sent us both apology cards and we sat down and spoke about it all. Tim has a history of meddling with other people's personal lives and interpersonal connections. This has occurred at least twice in the last several weeks. It was my pleasure to notify Jess that I've known Tim since I was 6 years old and that he isn't over your relationship. Over the next 3 to 4 months, my workload will drastically increase. Due to the fact that this took time away from me and my wife, Tim took advantage of the opportunity to speak with Jess more extensively. Initially, I was having issues with it since she would be at work until 12 o'clock at night, conversing with him and texting him incessantly during the day while ignoring our kid. After looking at her phone bill and seeing that she had texted him 1,500 times in 4 days, I cautioned her that things needed to change. They never followed through on their promises. No matter where we traveled, she was continually sending him messages. My thoughts that this was more than a nice talk became stronger until yesterday evening, when they walked out together for driving lessons with my wife, which would only last a couple of hours, confirmed my doubts. They left around 2 p.m., and by 10 p.m., I was beginning to have doubts. I used the Find My iPhone application on my iPhone to figure out where they had parked the car. This is a well-known spot for with other people. As a result, I decided to check into it more. When he unlocked the rear door of his car, he found them both naked in the back seat. Fortunately, I had arrived just in time to avoid anything worse from occurring. I'm enraged the police are called, and I tell Tim to stay away from us and never to contact any of us again, which he does. When we arrive home, my wife is in a complete state of chaos, and I'm at a loss for what to do. I told her that we would seek marriage counseling and that each of us would see a therapist separately. This ended up taking a lot longer than I had anticipated, but it was necessary for me to vent. I believe that what I'm seeking for right now is an outsider's perspective on the situation. I still like my wife, but is it really worth it to try to fix this?